In our modern world where cities hum with electricity and information travels in an instant, it can be hard to imagine that some communities live very differently. Across the globe, there are native and indigenous tribes who have maintained their unique ways of life for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. These groups often live in remote places like dense rainforests, high mountains, or secluded islands. They hold deep connections to the land, speak ancient languages, and follow traditions passed down through countless generations. Their lives are guided by knowledge that is very different from what is taught in modern schools, focusing on the rhythms of nature, family bonds, and spiritual beliefs that shape their entire world. This separation from the fast-paced modern world is often a deliberate choice. For many tribes, keeping a distance is a way to protect what makes them unique. They have seen what happens when outside influences arrive, bringing new technologies, new ideas, and often new problems. By staying apart, they can preserve their languages from being forgotten, and their sacred ceremonies from being misunderstood or disrespected. This choice is about survival. It is a way of ensuring that their children and their children's children will know who they are and where they come from, keeping the flame of their culture burning brightly in a world that is constantly changing around them and often pressures them to become just like everyone else. However, the modern world has a long reach, and it is becoming harder for any group to remain completely isolated. Outsiders, filled with curiosity, are increasingly interested in these distinct cultures. They read books, watch documentaries, and dream of visiting these far-off places to see a different way of life with their own eyes. This growing interest presents a very difficult question for tribal communities. Should they open their doors to these strangers? Welcoming outsiders could bring new opportunities, but it also carries great risks. This is not a simple yes or no question, it is a complex problem that every community must face on its own terms, weighing the potential benefits against the very real dangers. The decision to engage with the outside world or to remain separate is one of the most important challenges that Native peoples face today. It is a debate that happens in community meetings, around family fires, and within the hearts of tribal leaders. They must consider whether contact will strengthen their culture or weaken it. Will it bring prosperity, or will it lead to exploitation? There is no single right answer, as each tribe has its own unique history, its own values, and its own vision for the future. The choice they make will shape their destiny for generations to come, defining their relationship with a world that is eager to meet them, but may not always understand them. The idea of visiting a native tribe and experiencing its culture is what we call tribal tourism. For travelers, it seems like a wonderful opportunity. It is a chance to step away from familiar routines and learn directly from people who have a different perspective on life. Tourists hope to see traditional dances, taste unique foods, and hear stories that have been told for centuries. They are drawn by the idea of authenticity, of finding something real and ancient in a world that can often feel artificial. This desire is powerful, and it drives people to travel to the most remote corners of the planet, seeking a connection with a culture that is not their own and a glimpse into a different human experience. For the native communities, this interest from outsiders can be seen as a source of both hope and concern. On one hand, tourism can bring in money, which is often desperately needed. In many parts of the world, native groups have been pushed off their traditional lands and have limited ways to earn a living in the modern economy. Tourism can provide jobs and a new source of income, helping them to afford healthcare, education for their children, and other essential goods. It presents a way to participate in the global economy without having to abandon their homes or their way of life entirely, offering a path to economic stability. This economic opportunity, however, comes with a significant cultural price tag. When a tribe decides to welcome tourists, it must figure out how to present its culture to strangers. This process can be very complicated and stressful. What parts of their life should they share? What ceremonies are too sacred for outsiders to see? There is a real danger that culture can be turned into a product, something to be sold like a souvenir. Traditional dances might be shortened to fit a tourist schedule, and sacred rituals might be performed out of context, losing their true meaning. The very act of performing for an audience can change the nature of a tradition, turning it from a living practice into a staged show. Ultimately, the arrival of tourists creates a fundamental dilemma for native tribes. It is a classic double-edged sword that cuts both ways. Opening up to the world can provide the financial resources needed to survive and even thrive, but it also exposes their most precious traditions to misunderstanding, commercialization, and potential harm. The tribe must ask itself if the money earned is worth the risk of losing control over its own cultural identity. This is the central challenge of tribal tourism, finding a way to share their world with others, without letting that sharing destroy the very thing that makes their world unique and meaningful to them. A positive example of a tribe managing tourism can be found with the Kuna people of Panama. The Kuna live on a chain of small tropical islands called the San Blas Archipelago. For generations they have lived from the sea and the forest, developing a rich and vibrant culture. A central part of their identity is expressed through molas, which are beautiful multi-layered textile panels with intricate designs. Originally made as parts of women's blouses, these artworks depict geometric patterns, animals, and scenes from Kuna legends. The Kuna have skillfully turned this unique art form into a bridge between their traditional world and the modern economy, creating a sustainable source of income. When tourists visit the Kuna Islands, they are not just passive observers. They are invited to engage with the community in a controlled and respectful way. The Kuna have established their own rules for tourism. They own and operate the small lodges where visitors stay, they guide the boat tours, and they decide which parts of their villages are open to guests. This level of control is crucial. It ensures that the money generated by tourism flows directly back into the community, helping to fund schools, health clinics, and other local projects. It also means that the Kuna people themselves are the ones who interact with tourists, allowing them to tell their own stories in their own words. The sale of molas is a perfect illustration of how the Kuna have balanced culture and commerce. The women who create these textiles are respected artists in their community, and the income they earn gives them economic independence and a powerful voice. Tourists are eager to buy these authentic handmade crafts directly from the artisans who made them. This direct exchange is beneficial for everyone. The tourist gets a meaningful souvenir with a real story behind it, and the Kuna artist receives a fair price for her skill and labor. This process helps keep the tradition of mola making alive and thriving, passing it from mother to daughter as a vital part of their cultural and economic future. The Kuna experience shows that tribal tourism does not have to be exploitative. When the indigenous community is in charge, tourism can become a tool for empowerment. By setting their own boundaries, managing their own businesses, and making their own decisions, the Kuna have found a way to welcome outsiders without sacrificing their identity. They have chosen what to share: their art, their hospitality, and some aspects of their daily life, while protecting the parts of their culture that remain private and sacred. Their success provides a powerful model for other indigenous groups, demonstrating that it is possible to engage with the world on your own terms and for your own benefit. In the United States, many Native American tribes have also turned to tourism as a way to build economic strength and educate the public. For centuries, their cultures were misunderstood, suppressed, and often romanticized by outsiders. Today, tribes are taking back control of their own narrative. They are creating cultural centers, museums, and tourism programs that present their history and heritage from their own perspective. These are not just tourist attractions, they are powerful statements of survival and resilience. They offer a chance for non-native visitors to unlearn harmful stereotypes and gain a more accurate and respectful understanding of America's first peoples, listening to their stories directly. Take, for example, the many tribes in the American Southwest, such as the Pueblo peoples of New Mexico or the Navajo Nation. They have developed robust tourism enterprises that are owned and operated by the tribes themselves. Visitors can take guided tours of ancient sites like the Taos Pueblo, a continuously inhabited village for over 1,000 years, with a local guide explaining its history and significance. The Navajo Nation operates guided tours into Monument Valley and the Canyon de Chelly, ensuring that these sacred landscapes are treated with respect. This approach allows the tribes to create jobs for their people and generate revenue that supports the entire community, all while protecting their ancestral lands. Beyond just guided tours, many tribes use tourism as a platform for cultural education. They host public events like powwows, where visitors can witness traditional dancing, drumming, and singing in a vibrant and celebratory atmosphere. They open museums that showcase their artistic traditions, from pottery and basket weaving to contemporary painting and sculpture. These initiatives do more than just entertain tourists, they actively combat ignorance. By sharing their culture in a controlled and respectful setting, Tribes can show the world that their traditions are not relics of the past, but are living, evolving parts of modern life, full of beauty, complexity, and meaning. This model of tribal-led tourism is a powerful form of self-determination. When a tribe controls its tourism industry, it can make crucial decisions about what is appropriate to share and what must remain private. They can set rules for visitor behavior, protect fragile ecosystems, and ensure that sacred sites are not disturbed. This control is the key to making tourism a positive force. It transforms the relationship from one where outsiders come to see the Indians into one where visitors are invited to learn from a sovereign nation that is proudly sharing its heritage. It is a way of building bridges of understanding while reinforcing their own cultural foundations. For any tribe involved in tourism, one of the most important tasks is deciding what can be shared and what must be kept private. Every culture has aspects that are sacred. These can be religious ceremonies, specific places, traditional knowledge, or oral histories that are not meant for everyone. These sacred elements are the heart of a tribe's identity, the core of their spiritual life and worldview. They're not performances or products to be sold. Protecting them from the outside world is not about being secretive, it is about preserving the very soul of their culture. This act of protection is a fundamental right and a profound responsibility for tribal leaders and elders. When a tribe controls its own tourism, it has the power to draw this line. The community can come together to decide which dances are appropriate for a public powwow and which are reserved for private ceremonial moments. They can choose to guide tourists through certain parts of their land while declaring other areas, like burial grounds or sacred mountains, as off-limits. This is a delicate balancing act. The tribe wants to offer visitors a genuine and meaningful experience, but not at the cost of violating their own deepest values. The ability to make these choices is a key part of cultural sovereignty, allowing them to engage with the world without losing themselves. This process of deciding what to share can be very challenging. Sometimes there are disagreements within the community itself. Younger generations who may see the economic potential of tourism might be more willing to share things that elders feel should remain private. It requires careful discussion, respect for traditional authority, and a shared commitment to the long-term health of the culture. The goal is to find a path that allows for economic benefit, while ensuring that the spiritual and cultural foundations of the tribe remain strong and untouched by commercial pressures. This internal dialogue is just as important as the interaction with tourists. Ultimately, the best tourism experiences are those where these boundaries are clear and respected by everyone involved. When visitors understand that they are guests, and that some things are not for them to see or know, it fosters a deeper sense of respect. It changes the dynamic from one of consumption to one of genuine cultural exchange. A tourist who is told that a certain ceremony is private is learning something important about that culture's values. Protecting the sacred is not about shutting people out. It is about teaching them the true meaning of respect and ensuring that the culture can continue to flourish for generations to come on its own terms. One of the greatest dangers of tourism is its tendency to simplify complex cultures and reinforce harmful stereotypes. When tourists visit for a short time, they often only see a small, curated slice of life. They might watch a traditional dance or buy a piece of craft work, and then leave thinking they now understand the entire culture. This can lead to a very narrow and often inaccurate view. They may see native people only in historical costumes, performing ancient rituals, and not as the modern people they are. People who also drive cars, use smartphones, and participate in contemporary society while maintaining their unique cultural identities. This problem is made worse when tourism focuses on selling a romanticized or exotic image of a tribe. Tour operators might advertise an experience that promises to show primitive people living unchanged for centuries. This kind of marketing is not only disrespectful, but also deeply dishonest. It freezes native peoples in time, presenting them as relics of the past, rather than as dynamic living communities. This can make it harder for them to be taken seriously in the modern world, and to fight for their rights, as they are seen as characters in a historical drama, rather than as fellow citizens with contemporary needs and aspirations. The souvenirs that tourists buy can also contribute to this problem. While authentic, handmade crafts like the kunamolas can be a positive form of cultural exchange, mass-produced trinkets often do the opposite. Think of cheap, factory-made dream catchers or plastic tomahawks sold in gift shops far from any tribal community. These items strip cultural symbols of their meaning and turn them into cheap commodities. They reinforce stereotypes and create a false impression of native cultures. When tourists buy these fake souvenirs instead of authentic art, it not only misinforms them but also takes money away from the native artisans who are trying to make a living from their traditional skills. To avoid this danger, both tourists and tribes must be mindful. Tribes that control their own tourism can work to present a more complete and honest picture of their lives, showing both their traditions and their modern realities. They can educate visitors about the real meaning behind their ceremonies and art. For their part, tourists have a responsibility to be critical thinkers. They should seek out authentic experiences led by the communities themselves and ask thoughtful questions. They should understand that a one-hour tour can never capture the full richness of a culture that has existed for thousands of years. Overcoming stereotypes requires a commitment to seeing people in their full humanity, not just as a spectacle. The most damaging form of tribal tourism occurs when it is not controlled by the native community itself, but by outside companies or governments. In these situations, the tribe often sees very little of the profit, and their culture is treated as a product to be packaged and sold for someone else's gain. The people themselves can be turned into exhibits in what is sometimes called a living museum or human zoo. They are paid to dress in traditional clothing and perform tasks for the entertainment of tourists, often in a way that is demeaning and inauthentic. This kind of exploitation can cause deep and lasting harm to a community's dignity and self-respect. Imagine a tour bus pulling up to a village where the people have been hired by a tour company to act out a version of their traditional life. The tourists snap photos as if they are at a theme park, with little to no real interaction with the people they are watching. The villagers may be forced to perform sacred ceremonies on a schedule, stripped of their true meaning and turned into a hollow spectacle. In this model, the tribe has no power. They cannot set boundaries, they cannot correct misinformation, and they receive only a tiny fraction of the money that tourists pay for the experience. The outside company reaps the rewards, leaving the community with little more than the disruption to their daily lives. This exploitative model robs indigenous people of their agency. It takes away their right to represent themselves and tell their own stories. Instead, their identity is defined by the tour operator, who is usually more interested in profits than in cultural accuracy or respect. This can lead to the creation of completely false traditions or the exaggeration of exotic practices to make the experience more exciting for tourists. The community becomes trapped in a role created for them by others, unable to show the world who they truly are. This is not cultural exchange. It is a performance of stereotypes for cash, and it can be profoundly damaging to a community's spirit. This is why tribal control is so absolutely essential. When a tribe manages its own tourism, it can ensure that the experience is respectful, authentic, and beneficial to the community. They can insist that visitors are treated as guests, not as customers watching a show. They can use tourism as a tool to educate people and build bridges of understanding, rather than as a means of their own exploitation. The difference between a tribe controlling its own story and having an outsider control, it is the difference between empowerment and oppression. It is the difference between a celebration of a living culture and its slow suffocation inside a museum of someone else's making. Beyond the cultural impacts, tourism can also bring significant harm to the very environments that native peoples have protected for generations. Many indigenous communities live in areas of incredible natural beauty and biodiversity, such as the Amazon rainforest, the coral reefs of the Pacific, or the fragile ecosystems of the Arctic. These are the lands that sustain them, providing food, medicine, and spiritual connection. When large numbers of tourists arrive, they bring with them a heavy environmental footprint. The construction of hotels, roads, and airports can lead to deforestation, soil erosion, and the destruction of wildlife habitats, scarring the land permanently. In places like Hawaii, the massive tourism industry has put immense pressure on natural resources. The demand for fresh water for resorts and golf courses can divert water away from traditional farming areas, harming the ability of native Hawaiians to grow taro and other ancestral crops. Coastal development and pollution from tourist activities can damage the delicate coral reefs that are vital to the marine ecosystem. Similarly, in parts of South America and Africa, the arrival of safari tours and jungle lodges can disrupt animal migration patterns and introduce pollution into rivers and streams that communities depend on for drinking water, leaving a trail of degradation. This environmental damage is not just a practical problem, it is a spiritual one. For most indigenous cultures, the land is not just a resource to be used, it is a sacred entity, a relative, and the source of their identity. Harming the land is like harming a member of their own family. When a sacred mountain is scarred by a new road or a sacred river is polluted, it causes deep spiritual and emotional pain. This connection to the environment is something that the tourism industry, with its focus on profit and growth, often fails to understand or respect. The cost of environmental damage is therefore paid not just in ecological terms, but in cultural and spiritual ones as well. This is yet another reason why tribal control over tourism is so critical. A community that has a deep, multi-generational connection to its land is far more likely to prioritize its long-term health over short-term profits. They can develop forms of tourism, often called ecotourism, that are small-scale, sustainable, and designed to have a minimal impact on the environment. They can set rules for tourists to ensure that they do not leave behind trash, disturb wildlife, or damage fragile ecosystems. By managing tourism themselves, native peoples can work to ensure that their ancestral lands remain healthy and vibrant for future generations, protecting the foundation of their culture. As we have seen, the relationship between native tribes and tourism is incredibly complex, filled with both promise and peril. There is no single simple answer that applies to every community. Each tribe is unique with its own history, its own values, and its own goals for the future. A model that works for the Kuna in Panama may not be right for a tribe in the Amazon or a community in the Arctic. The decision to engage with tourism, and how to do so, is a sovereign right that belongs to each tribe alone. The most important principle is self-determination, the right of a people to control their own destiny. The most successful and ethical examples of tribal tourism are always the ones where the indigenous community is in the driver's seat. When they own the businesses, train the guides, set the rules, and decide what to share, tourism can become a powerful tool for cultural preservation and economic empowerment. It allows them to build a better future for their children while strengthening their connection to their heritage. This control ensures that the benefits, both financial and cultural, flow back into the community, helping it to thrive in the modern world without losing the ancient wisdom that defines it. As visitors and outsiders, we have a profound responsibility to support this model. This means doing our homework before we travel. We should seek out tourism experiences that are owned and operated by the indigenous communities themselves. We should be willing to pay a fair price for authentic art and experiences, knowing that our money is supporting the community directly. Most importantly, we must approach every interaction with humility and respect. We are guests in someone else's home, and we should behave as such, listening more than we speak, following their rules, and honoring their boundaries without question. In the end, the future of tribal tourism depends on finding a delicate balance. It is a balance between sharing and protecting, between economic need and cultural integrity, between welcoming the world and preserving a private, sacred space. This balance can only be achieved when native voices are the ones leading the conversation. By respecting their right to choose their own path and supporting their efforts to control their own stories and lands, we can help ensure that tourism becomes a bridge between worlds, not a force of destruction. It is a path that requires patience, understanding, and a deep and abiding respect for the world's first cultures.